It was the kind of party you read about in glossy magazines. Champagne towers glistening under chandeliers, violins playing softly in the background, and a sea of tailored suits and glittering gowns. The Blake family, one of the wealthiest and most influential white billionaire dynasties in the country, had spared no expense for their annual charity gala. Cameras flashed as luxury cars rolled up the driveway of their sprawling estate, each guest stepping out as though walking onto a red carpet. But beneath the polished elegance and rehearsed smiles, there was an unspoken code among the elite, a code that, on this particular night, would be broken in the most unexpected way. Alicia Munro knew she didn't belong here, or at least that's what they wanted her to think. She stepped into the grand ballroom with quiet confidence, wearing a sleek black gown that caught the light with every step. As the founder of a fast-growing tech company valued in the billions, Alicia wasn't just another guest. She was the key to finalizing one of the largest deals in the Blake family's history. Her innovations had the power to transform their empire, and both sides stood to make fortunes. The irony was that most of the people in that room didn't know her face, only her name, and tonight, that would work both for and against her. From the moment she walked in, Alicia could feel the weight of stares following her. Not the curious kind that come with admiration, but the kind that quietly measures and judges. She passed clusters of well-dressed guests who lowered their voices just enough to make sure she couldn't hear the full sentence, but loud enough to send a message. Her skin tone was not common here, and though no one dared say it outright, their glances spoke volumes. Still, Alicia had built her career by ignoring doubters. She smiled politely, introduced herself when necessary, and kept her head high. Near the center of the room, she finally spotted the hosts, Richard and Evelyn Blake. Richard, tall and silver-haired, had the charm of a seasoned businessman who had closed more deals over a glass of whiskey than most people could in a lifetime. Evelyn, draped in an emerald silk gown, had a beauty that seemed frozen in time, her smile practiced to perfection. They greeted Alicia warmly at first, though she noticed Evelyn's eyes flicker downward, scanning her attire in the way someone might appraise a painting they weren't quite sure belonged in their collection. The introductions were brief, interrupted by a sudden burst of laughter from a nearby group. Alicia turned to see a few of the younger Blakes, nephews and nieces in their 20s, holding champagne flutes and smirking in her direction. She didn't know what they were whispering, but the glances they exchanged told her enough. She brushed it off, reminding herself why she was here. This wasn't about making friends. It was about sealing a deal that could change the future of her company. But the night had other plans. As the evening wore on, Alicia found herself cornered in polite conversation with a few of the family's business partners. It started subtly, a remark about her interesting name, a question about where she was from, that carried more weight than curiosity. Then came the jokes, disguised as banter but layered with something sharper. One man chuckled as he asked if she ever felt out of place in rooms like this. Another wondered aloud if she was in the right department, clearly assuming she wasn't the CEO. She responded with grace, keeping her voice even, her smile intact, but inside she felt the sting. The moment that shifted everything happened near the dessert table. Alicia had just taken a glass of sparkling water when one of the younger Blakes, Lucas, approached her with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. Loud enough for several people nearby to hear, he said, "I guess Richard didn't tell you this party was black tie, not black turtleneck." The comment was met with muffled laughs from his friends, and though it was dressed as humor, the meaning was clear. Alicia froze for a moment, her fingers tightening around the stem of her glass. She could feel every set of eyes on her, waiting to see how she would react. Evelyn Blake, standing just a few feet away, did nothing to stop it. In fact, Alicia caught the faintest hint of a smirk before Evelyn turned away. It wasn't just the comment that hurt, it was the collective approval of the people who should have known better. In that moment, Alicia realized something important. This wasn't an accident. This was a test. And they had already decided she didn't belong. But they had underestimated her. Alicia didn't raise her voice. She didn't throw her drink or storm out. Instead, she smiled, calm, controlled, almost amused. She turned to Lucas and said, You're right. I didn't get the dress code. But I did get the contract details. Her words hung in the air for a beat too long, enough to make a few people shift uncomfortably. She excused herself and walked away, leaving Lucas blinking in confusion. From that point on, Alicia's presence at the party became an uncomfortable reality for the Blake family. Some avoided her entirely, while others doubled down on the thinly veiled remarks. But Alicia was no stranger to walking into rooms where people didn't expect her to belong. What they didn't know was that she had been debating for weeks whether this billion-dollar deal was even worth the compromise. And tonight they had made her decision easier. In the far corner of the ballroom, Richard Blake was deep in conversation with two board members when Alicia approached him. She waited for him to finish, her expression unreadable. "Richard," she said softly, "we need to talk. Tonight." He glanced at her, perhaps sensing a shift in tone, and agreed to meet her in his study after the gala. As the night dragged on, Alicia could feel the anticipation building inside her. This wasn't just about business anymore. It was about respect, dignity, and the unspoken truth that money and influence don't excuse arrogance. Every comment, every laugh at her expense had been a brick in the wall they were building between her and them. What they didn't realize was that she was about to tear it down in one decisive move. When the final toast was given and guests began to leave, Alicia followed Richard to the study. The heavy wooden door closed behind them, shutting out the last notes of music from the ballroom. Richard gestured for her to sit, but she remained standing. "I've made a decision," she began, her voice steady. He raised an eyebrow, clearly expecting her to confirm the deal. Instead, she placed her phone on the desk and slid it toward him. "Before I answer, I think you should watch this." The screen lit up with a video, one taken tonight. It showed Lucas's comment, the laughter, the way Evelyn turned away. It captured every sneer, every whisper. Richard's expression darkened as he watched, but Alicia didn't wait for him to respond. She leaned forward, her words deliberate. "This is the culture I'd be partnering with. And I don't do business with people who can't respect the person they're shaking hands with." Her next sentence would change everything. But before she could speak it, the study door creaked open. Evelyn stepped inside, her eyes cold and calculating. And in that charged silence, it was clear, the real confrontation was only just beginning. Evelyn's heels clicked softly against the hardwood floor as she closed the door behind her. The quiet sound seemed almost louder than the music still faintly playing in the background of the gala. Alicia could see the way Richard's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. Evelyn's gaze moved from her husband to Alicia, lingering on her for just a moment longer than necessary. It wasn't the kind of look that asked a question, it was the kind that measured, calculated, and decided whether someone was worth her time. "I didn't realize we were holding business meetings during the party," Evelyn said smoothly. Her tone wrapped in politeness but dipped in something sharper. Alicia didn't answer right away. She let the silence stretch, watching how Evelyn shifted slightly, just enough to suggest that she was trying to read Alicia's next move. "This isn't about business," Alicia finally said. "It's about integrity." Evelyn's lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Integrity," she repeated softly, as if testing the word on her tongue. "Well, that's a strong word for a misunderstanding." Richard leaned back in his chair, his fingers drumming once against the desk. Alicia noticed the way he avoided looking directly at her. She wondered if he'd already guessed what this conversation was leading toward. "Was it a misunderstanding," Alicia asked, "when your nephew decided to make me the punchline for the evening? Or when your guests whispered behind my back? Or when you stood there and said nothing?" Evelyn tilted her head slightly. "You have to understand, dear, people at these events. They don't always know how to handle someone who doesn't fit the usual mold." They weren't being malicious. Alicia held her gaze, unblinking. "You're right. I don't fit your mold. And I don't intend to." Richard shifted in his chair, finally meeting her eyes. "Alicia, let's not make this bigger than it is. We've all had a long night. If you want an apology from Lucas, I can arrange that." But Alicia could tell it wasn't about an apology for them. This was about keeping the deal alive, keeping her tied to their empire because of what she represented on paper. The truth was they didn't value her as a person, only as a figure in their financial projections. She took a slow breath, reminding herself that this wasn't the moment to end things. Not yet. If she walked away now, she'd leave with the moral high ground, yes, but without exposing what really lay under the Blake family's polished exterior. And Alicia had a feeling there was more to uncover here than a spoiled nephew's insult. She turned back to Richard. Before we move forward, or don't, I need to understand exactly who I'd be doing business with. Tell me, Richard, where does your family's money really come from? For the first time that evening, Richard didn't have a ready answer. He glanced at Evelyn, whose expression didn't flicker. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was heavy, as if something unspoken had settled into the room. Is this an interrogation? Evelyn asked lightly, but Alicia could hear the warning underneath. No, Alicia replied. It's due diligence. She left the study without another word, letting the tension hang in the air behind her. In the hallway, the sounds of the gala swelled again. Laughter, clinking glasses, the distant hum of conversation. But Alicia's mind wasn't on the party anymore. It was on the way Richard's hand had tightened around the arm of his chair when she'd asked about the source of their wealth, and the way Evelyn had stepped in to control the conversation before he could answer. Over the years, Alicia had learned to trust her instincts. And right now, they were telling her that the Blakes' empire wasn't built on as much transparency as they claimed. She didn't head for the exit immediately. Instead, she moved through the crowd, her expression composed, collecting pieces of conversation like scattered puzzle pieces. Most people were too caught up in their own small circles to notice her listening. She heard whispers about past deals that had mysteriously fallen apart, about competitors who had been taken care of, about a partnership in Europe that had ended under strange circumstances. The comments were vague, but they all hinted at the same thing. The Blakes didn't just win in business. They eliminated threats. By the time she reached the far end of the ballroom, she'd decided she needed more than gossip. She needed facts. She found herself near the catering staff, where waiters slipped in and out of a side hallway leading to the service area. It was there she overheard two employees talking in low voices. You should have seen the last guy who works security here. Gone the next day after he asked too many questions. Yeah, and remember that reporter? The one digging into those offshore accounts. Same thing. Vanished from the story overnight. Alicia kept walking, not wanting to draw attention, but her pulse quickened. Offshore accounts. Reporters silenced. Security staff disappearing. It was all starting to sound like the Blake family's influence stretched much further, and much darker, than their public image let on. She needed to get out of here and start connecting the dots. But just as she reached the front entrance, a voice stopped her. Leaving so soon? It was Lucas, leaning casually against the marble pillar by the door, the same smirk on his face as earlier. Hope you're not upset about earlier. You know how it is, just a little fun. Alicia stared at him for a long moment, weighing her words. You should be more careful with your fun, Lucas. Sometimes the joke ends up costing more than you think. His smirk faltered, but only slightly. And sometimes, he said quietly, the cost isn't yours to pay. The way he said it, measured, almost threatening, sent a flicker of unease through her. It wasn't just arrogance in his tone. It was something colder. She walked past him without another word, the cool night air hitting her as she stepped outside. The valet brought her car around, but even as she drove away, her mind replayed the look in Lucas's eyes. It was the same look she'd seen in people who believed they could get away with anything. Back in her penthouse apartment, Alicia set her clutch on the counter and poured herself a glass of water. The city lights glittered beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, but her mind was far from the skyline. She pulled out her laptop and began digging. Within an hour, she had pulled together a preliminary web of connections. Shell companies, private investments hidden behind layers of legal complexity, and a series of acquisitions that didn't quite add up. The deeper she looked, the more it became clear. The Blakes had a pattern of entering deals, extracting what they wanted, and then cutting off the other party in ways that left no legal trail. And now, she suspected, they were planning to do the same with her. She sat back in her chair, the glow of the screen reflecting in her eyes. This was no longer just about whether she signed the deal. It was about uncovering the truth, and making sure that truth saw daylight. But as she closed the laptop for the night, her phone buzzed on the counter. A new message appeared from an unknown number. It read, "Be careful who you talk to. They're already watching you." She froze, staring at the words. Whoever had sent it knew enough to reach her privately, and the timing was too sharp to be a coincidence. Her first thought was that it could be a warning from someone inside the Blake circle, maybe a staff member who had seen too much. Or maybe it was from someone else entirely, someone with their own reasons for wanting the Blakes exposed. Either way, it confirmed what she had already begun to suspect. This was bigger than a party insult. Bigger than a business deal. And Alicia Monroe had just stepped into something far more dangerous than she'd imagined. Alicia didn't sleep much that night. She sat on her couch long after the city had gone quiet, replaying every moment of the gala in her mind. The forced smiles, the whispering, the way Richard had gone silent at her question, and Lucas's strange warning at the door. That text message still sat on her phone screen like a shadow she couldn't shake. Whoever sent it knew enough to find her, and that meant her name was already in conversations she hadn't heard. By morning, she decided she needed more than internet searches. The Blakes operated in a world where public records barely scratched the surface. If she was going to find the truth, she needed someone who understood how to dig in the places most people didn't even know existed. There was only one person she trusted for that. Marcus Hale, an investigative journalist she'd crossed paths with years ago during a corporate scandal. Back then, he'd been chasing a story on a pharmaceutical company, and Alicia had been a whistleblower's silent ally. She called him from her office, keeping her voice low. "Marcus, I need to talk. In person." An hour later, they met at a small cafe far from downtown, the kind of place where no one looked twice at the people sitting in the back corner. Marcus was grayer now, his beard flecked with white, but his eyes still carried that sharp, restless focus. "I figured you'd call me again one day," he said as soon as he sat down. "Who's in trouble this time?" Alicia didn't bother with small talk. She told him everything, about the gala, the comments, the way the Blakes reacted, the offshore account she'd stumbled across, and the message on her phone. Marcus didn't interrupt. He just listened, his brow furrowing deeper with each detail. When she finished, he leaned back. "The Blakes have been untouchable for decades. People have tried to dig into them, but every time the trail goes cold. And anyone who gets close enough to make noise suddenly finds another job, another city, another reason to disappear quietly. They don't threaten you directly. They just make it impossible for you to keep standing where you are." Alicia's fingers tightened around her coffee cup. "So you're telling me they've done this before?" "More times than I can count," Marcus said. "The difference is, you're not just a journalist or a competitor. You're someone they think they can use. That makes you valuable to them, until you're not." They agreed to share information as they found it. Marcus would pull his old contacts, and Alicia would keep acting as if the deal was still on the table, buying herself time to get closer to the Blakes without raising suspicion. It was risky, but she knew she'd only get one shot at uncovering whatever was hidden beneath their perfect image. Back at her office, her assistant, Janelle, handed her a stack of documents. "These came in from the Blake legal team. They want you to review them before tomorrow's meeting." Alicia flipped through the pages quickly. Most of it was standard corporate language, but buried in the middle was a clause she hadn't seen before, one that gave the Blakes control over key elements of her company's intellectual property if certain conditions were met. It was written in careful legal terms, but she knew enough to see what it really meant. If the deal went through, they'd have the ability to slowly take over the core of her business without her being able to stop them. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number. "Check the Cayman filings. Start with 2016. She stared at it for a moment, her pulse quickening. Whoever this was, they weren't just sending vague warnings. They were giving her specific leads. She typed a quick reply. "Who are you?" The three dots appeared for a moment, then vanished. No answer. That night, Alicia sat at her dining table with her laptop open, combing through financial records from the Cayman Islands. It wasn't easy. Most of it was buried under shell corporations and holding companies, but eventually a pattern started to emerge. The Blakes had moved large sums of money through seemingly unrelated businesses, many of which dissolved months after the transactions. The amounts were huge, hundreds of millions at a time, but the purpose was never clear. In the middle of her research, her building's intercom buzzed. "Ms. Monroe," the concierge said, "someone dropped off a package for you. No name, no return address." She went downstairs to collect it. The package was small, wrapped in plain brown paper. Inside was a single USB drive and a note written in neat block letters. "Not everything at the gala was meant to be seen. Look closely." Her heart pounded as she plugged the drive into her laptop. A folder popped up. Video files, all time-stamped from the night of the gala. She clicked on the first one and froze. It was security camera footage from inside the Blake's estate, showing a hallway Alicia recognized from near the study. In the video, Richard Blake stepped out of the room with a man Alicia had never seen before. They spoke in hushed tones, but the audio was just clear enough to catch fragments. "Transfer. Cayman account. No delays." The next video showed Evelyn in another part of the house, handing a thick envelope to a man in a catering uniform. He slipped it into his jacket and left through a side exit. Alicia didn't know what was in the envelope, but the way Evelyn looked around before passing it off made it clear it wasn't part of the evening's charity work. The last video stopped her cold. It was the ballroom, shortly after Lucas's comment to her. Lucas was speaking to a man with a slicked-back haircut, gesturing toward her with his champagne glass. Though the audio was muffled, she could make out a single sentence. "She'll never see it coming." Alicia sat back, her mind racing. This wasn't just arrogance or carelessness. This was deliberate, coordinated. She picked up her phone and called Marcus. "I think I just got something big," she said. "But if we're going to move on this, we need to figure out who's feeding me information. And why." Marcus's voice was calm but urgent. "Be careful, Alicia. If someone inside the Blake circle is passing you this, it means there's a fracture. But it also means they're watching you closely. One wrong step and you'll tip your hand." The next morning, Alicia walked into the Blake headquarters for their scheduled meeting, the USB drive tucked in her bag. The glass towers gleamed in the sunlight, their pristine facade giving no hint of what she'd seen the night before. Inside, the receptionist greeted her warmly, but Alicia noticed a man in a dark suit standing just inside the lobby, watching her too closely to be a coincidence. She took the elevator to the top floor, where Richard's office overlooked the city. He greeted her with his usual charm, but she saw something else in his eyes now. Curiosity, maybe suspicion. Evelyn was there too, her smile perfectly in place. As they began discussing the contract, Alicia played her part, nodding and asking questions, letting them think she was still weighing the offer. But in her mind, she was already 2 steps ahead, thinking about the footage, the mysterious messages, and the unanswered question at the center of all this. Why someone inside their world wanted her to see what they were hiding. And somewhere in the back of her mind, she knew the real danger wasn't in what she'd already found. It was in what she hadn't discovered yet. The meeting in Richard Blake's office stretched on for almost 2 hours, but Alicia barely heard half of what was said. Her focus kept slipping to Evelyn's perfectly composed face, to the way Lucas lounged in the corner with his phone, pretending not to listen. Every now and then, she caught him glancing at her. His expression unreadable. She wondered if he knew about the videos. She wondered if he'd been the one who sent them. When the meeting finally ended, Richard offered her a practiced handshake. His smile as smooth as the polished wood desk between them. "Think it over," he said. "This could be the beginning of something very profitable for you." Alicia returned the smile, hiding the churn of adrenaline in her chest. "I'll be in touch soon." As she walked back through the lobby, the man in the dark suit was still there, This time he didn't bother pretending. His eyes followed her until the glass doors closed behind her. Outside, the sharp winter air hit her lungs, but it didn't clear the weight pressing against her ribs. Someone was watching. The only question was whether they were keeping her safe, or waiting for her to make a mistake. Marcus called before she even reached her car. "I checked the Cayman filings you mentioned," he said. "It's worse than we thought. Those shell companies. They're tied to government contracts. Contracts that don't exist on paper here. If that's true, the Blakes aren't just hiding money. They're moving it for people who don't want to be seen." Alicia gripped the steering wheel tighter. "And if that comes out, it won't just cost them money," Marcus finished. "It'll burn every bridge they've spent 40 years building." That night, Alicia's apartment felt smaller than usual, every shadow in the corners sharper, every creak of the floorboards louder. She kept the curtains drawn and her phone close. At midnight, another message came through from the unknown number. "You're running out of time. Check the study drawer." Her pulse jumped. The study, the one in the Blake estate she'd been near during the gala. If there was something hidden there, she'd have to get back inside. But how? Security was tight, and after that meeting, she knew they'd be watching her even more closely. She barely slept, and by morning, a plan had begun to take shape. The Blakes were hosting a private charity luncheon that weekend. Smaller than the gala, but still big enough for outsiders to blend in. She could get an invite through a mutual acquaintance, someone who wouldn't question why she wanted to attend. 2 days later, Alicia walked into the estate again, her heels clicking against the marble floor. The rooms were full of polite laughter and the clinking of champagne glasses, but under it all was a quiet tension she couldn't ignore. Lucas was there, leaning against the bar. When he spotted her, his expression flickered, just for a second, before he straightened and made his way over. "I didn't think we'd see you again so soon," he said, his tone light but edged. "Just here for the cause," she replied, smiling as if nothing was wrong. But Lucas didn't leave. He studied her for a moment, then leaned in slightly. "Careful where you wander. Some rooms aren't meant for guests." It wasn't a warning. It was a test. She spent the next hour making polite conversation, waiting for the right moment. When a small crowd gathered around Evelyn in the garden, Alicia slipped away, moving quickly through the hallways until she found the study. The door was unlocked. She stepped inside, the scent of leather and polished wood heavy in the air. The drawer the message mentioned was in the large desk at the center of the room. She pulled it open, at first finding nothing but neatly stacked envelopes and pens. But then her fingers brushed against the edge of something taped underneath. She peeled it away carefully, revealing a small black notebook. Its cover was worn, and the pages inside were filled with handwritten notes, dates, names, and amounts. Millions of dollars tied to company names she recognized from the Cayman filings. At the bottom of one page was a single line that made her breath catch. "Ensure Monroe deal proceeds. Leverage IP." She snapped the notebook shut, sliding it into her bag just as footsteps approached. The doorknob turned. Alicia froze, her mind racing for an excuse, but before she could move, Lucas stepped inside. His gaze dropped immediately to her bag, then back to her face. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then he closed the door behind him. "You really shouldn't be in here," he said quietly. Alicia met his stare. "Then maybe you should tell me why you wanted me to see this." His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did. A flicker of surprise, maybe even respect. "You think I'm the one sending those messages?" "If it's not you," she said, "then someone very close to you is. And they're giving me enough to take your family down." Lucas stepped closer, his voice dropping lower. "You have no idea what you're stepping into. This isn't just about the Blakes. There are people in this who don't lose. Ever." Before she could respond, another voice called from the hallway. Evelyn's, sharp and impatient. Lucas glanced toward the door, then back at her. "Put it back," he said. "And walk out like nothing happened. It's the only way you're going to make it to the end of this." But Alicia didn't move. Her heart pounded, the weight of the notebook heavy in her bag. She knew this was the moment, the point where stepping back might save her, but stepping forward could expose everything. Evelyn's footsteps were getting closer, and Alicia was running out of time. Evelyn's voice was right outside the study now, crisp and commanding as she gave instructions to someone in the hallway. Lucas's jaw tightened, and for a split second, Alicia thought he might actually try to take the bag from her. But then, just as the doorknob began to turn, he stepped aside and said under his breath, "If you're going to run, run now." Alicia didn't hesitate. She slipped past him and out the opposite door that led into a narrow side corridor. The noise of the luncheon was faint here, replaced by the muffled hum of the estate's heating system. Her heels made almost no sound on the thick carpet as she moved quickly toward the back exit. But halfway down the hall she froze. Two men in black suits were walking toward her, neither of them security she recognized from the gala. They weren't smiling, and their eyes locked on her with unsettling precision. She turned sharply into another hallway, only to find it a dead end. The men closed the distance with calm, deliberate steps. "Miss Monroe," one of them said in a low voice. "Mr. Blake would like a word." Now. Alicia's mind spun. Richard Blake had no idea she had the notebook, or did he? The only way to know was to go with them, but that could mean walking straight into a trap. Before she could answer, Lucas appeared at the far end of the corridor. "She's with me," he said smoothly, his expression unreadable. The men exchanged a glance but stepped aside. Lucas didn't wait for her to thank him. He simply turned and started walking, forcing her to follow. They ended up in a small conservatory at the far end of the estate, its glass walls looking out over the snow-covered gardens. No one else was there. Lucas faced her, his hands in his pockets. "You're making enemies faster than you think," he said quietly. "And not just here." "What's that supposed to mean?" Alicia asked. "It means that whatever's in that notebook, it's tied to people outside my family. People who've already lost millions because of one of your past projects." His eyes narrowed. "You think this is just about a deal? They want payback." The air between them felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. Alicia's stomach twisted. If Lucas was telling the truth, then she wasn't just up against the Blakes. Someone else, someone powerful, was pulling strings behind the scenes. And if they knew who she was, they could already be moving against her. Her phone buzzed in her bag. She pulled it out, half expecting another message from the unknown number. But this time it was a live video feed. The screen showed Marcus, tied to a chair in a dimly lit room, his head hanging low. A distorted voice came through. "Drop it, Alicia, or he disappears." Her pulse spiked. She looked up at Lucas, who was watching her carefully, as if trying to read the expression on her face. She didn't know if he was involved in this, or if he was just as blindsided as she was. "Where is he?" she demanded, her voice sharp. Lucas shook his head. "I don't know. But if they have him, you're already on borrowed time." The feed ended abruptly, leaving her staring at the black screen. For a moment, the silence in the conservatory felt suffocating. Alicia tightened her grip on the phone. "If I walk away now, they'll still come after me. The only difference is, they'll win." Lucas studied her for a long moment. "Then you'd better figure out who you can actually trust," he said finally. "Because in this game, everyone's smiling right up until they're not." Outside, snow had begun to fall harder, the white flakes blurring the view of the gardens. Somewhere deep in the estate, the sound of a door slamming echoed faintly. And Alicia knew with chilling certainty that she was running out of safe exits, both from the house and from the web she'd been pulled into. But now it wasn't just her life on the line. It was Marcus's. And the people holding him had just made the stakes far deadlier than she'd ever imagined. The storm outside had turned the night into a blur of snow and shadows by the time Alicia reached the underground garage. Lucas was at her side, moving quickly but without panic, like someone who had done this kind of thing before. They had pieced together enough clues from the notebook to trace the location of the video feed, A derelict warehouse on the edge of the city, one the Blake family had sold years ago but still quietly controlled. The drive there was silent except for the hum of the engine and the occasional gust of wind rattling the car. Alicia kept glancing at her phone, hoping for another message, another sign Marcus was still alive. But the screen stayed black. Every minute felt heavier than the last. When they arrived, the warehouse loomed over them, its steel walls streaked with rust, a single light flickering above the side entrance. Lucas cut the engine and turned to her. "Once we go in, there's no guarantee we can walk out clean. You sure you want to do this?" Alicia met his eyes. "I didn't come this far to quit." They slipped inside, the echo of their footsteps swallowed by the cavernous interior. Somewhere in the shadows, a faint groan broke the silence. Alicia's heart jumped Marcus. She ran toward the sound, her boots crunching over scattered debris. She found him tied to the chair from the video, head still bowed. "Marcus," she whispered, dropping to her knees to untie the ropes. He stirred, lifting his head just enough for her to see his swollen eye and cracked lip. But before she could free him, a voice rang out from the darkness. "Touch him, and the deal dies with you." Evelyn Blake stepped into the dim light, her white coat glowing like fresh snow. Behind her, two of the suited men from the party flanked the door. She looked calm, almost amused, as if this were nothing more than another business negotiation. "You had something that belonged to us," Evelyn said, her heels clicking against the concrete as she approached. "But I'll give you a choice. Hand over the notebook and you and your friend walk away. No more games." Alicia stood slowly, pulling the leather-bound book from her bag. "You mean this?" She held it out, but didn't move closer. "It's not just numbers, Evelyn. It's proof your family's been manipulating markets, crushing small companies, destroying lives for profit. If I give this to you, I'm giving you a clean slate you don't deserve." Evelyn's smile didn't falter. "You think anyone will believe you? People believe money, not stories." Lucas shifted beside Alicia, his voice cutting through the tension. "What if the story comes with receipts? I sent copies of the notebook to 3 different reporters before we left the house." For the first time, Evelyn's smile twitched. The air crackled. One of the suited men reached for his jacket pocket, but before he could pull anything out, the sound of sirens erupted in the distance, growing louder. Evelyn's eyes narrowed, calculating. Then she turned sharply and walked toward the opposite exit. Her men followed without another word. Alicia rushed to untie Marcus, pulling him to his feet. His legs were shaky, but he managed a weak smile. "You always know how to throw a party," he murmured. They stepped outside just as the first police car skidded to a stop, lights flashing across the snow. Officers spilled out, moving past them toward the warehouse. Alicia knew it was over, or at least this part of it. The Blakes would fight back, but now the truth was out in the open. As she helped Marcus into the car, she glanced at Lucas. "Why did you help me?" He looked straight ahead, his breath clouding in the cold. "Let's just say, some things even money can't make right." Alicia started the engine, ready to drive them away from the chaos. But just as she pulled onto the road, her phone buzzed. A new message appeared on the screen. No name, just the same unknown number as before. "You think you've won, but you've only taken one piece off the board." Attached was a single photo. Marcus tied to the chair. The timestamp read 10 minutes ago. Alicia's blood ran cold. She turned to Marcus sitting beside her, but before she could speak, he smiled faintly, too faintly, and said, "We need to talk." And in that instant, she realized the real game had only just begun. Alicia's hands tightened around the steering wheel, her eyes flicking between Marcus and the road ahead. The picture on her phone still glowed in her mind, more chilling than the snowstorm outside. It wasn't possible. Marcus was right there beside her, bruised but breathing. Yet the timestamp didn't lie. "Marcus, what is this?" she asked, her voice low, almost afraid of the answer. He looked at her for a long moment, the faint smile fading from his lips. It's complicated, he said finally. And you're not going to like it. The silence between them thickened. Lucas kept his gaze locked out the window, his jaw tight as if he already knew. Alicia's stomach twisted. She thought about the party, the deal, Evelyn's cold stare, the notebook, and now this. Marcus let out a shaky breath. They never took me to hurt me. They took me because I knew too much. I wasn't just a bystander, Alicia. I was part of it once. Years ago I worked with the Blakes. I helped set up some of those deals you want to expose. His eyes were heavy with regret. But when I saw what they were doing to people, I walked away. Thought I was safe. I thought if I stayed quiet, they'd leave me alone. Alicia felt the betrayal sink deep, colder than the wind whistling through the car vents. So you've been keeping this from me. The whole time. I didn't want you dragged into it, Marcus said. But when you started digging, I knew they'd come after you. That's why I showed up at the party. I thought I could warn you before it was too late. Her mind spun. The photo, the message, it wasn't a threat. It was a reminder. The Blakes were telling her they still had the upper hand, that no matter what she thought she'd accomplished, they could rewrite the game. They reached her apartment just before dawn. The sky was a pale gray, the city muffled under fresh snow. Inside, she set Marcus on the couch with a blanket while Lucas locked the doors and checked the windows. Alicia sat across from Marcus, notebook in hand, flipping through its pages one last time. She knew the reporters had already received their copies. She knew the police had the warehouse under investigation. But she also knew the Blakes had power that didn't vanish overnight. They could drag cases out for years, bury evidence, twist narratives until the truth looked like a lie. Marcus broke the silence. You still have a choice. You can walk away. Let the reporters handle it. Forget all of this. She looked at him steadily. And give them the satisfaction of thinking they can silence people forever. Well, that's not happening. Lucas gave a small nod. Then we plan for what's next. The notebook is just the start. To find more. Every document, every witness, every deal they ever touched, we make it public. The next weeks blurred into long days and longer nights. Alicia met with journalists, legal experts, and activists. She sifted through files, emails, and contracts Marcus helped her decode. Lucas tapped into his old contacts, pulling information from places Alicia didn't want to know about. Every piece painted a bigger picture. Corruption that stretched beyond the Blakes, reaching into boardrooms, political offices, and overseas accounts. The pressure mounted. Strange cars idled near her building at night. Anonymous calls came at odd hours. Once, someone left an unmarked envelope under her door. Inside it a single white chess piece, the Queen. But the tide began to turn. A major news outlet ran the first story, complete with leaked documents. Public outrage grew. Investors started pulling out of Blake-owned companies. A Senate committee announced an inquiry. And for the first time, Evelyn Blake's face appeared on television looking less than composed. One evening, as Alicia sorted through the last of the files, her phone rang. Caller ID was blocked. She hesitated, then answered. Alicia. Evelyn's voice was smooth but edged with something sharper now. You've made quite a mess. But messes can be cleaned. We could end this quietly. You walk away and I make sure your friends are comfortable. No more threats. No more surprises. Alicia's grip on the phone tightened. You had your chance to do the right thing. Now you get to deal with the consequences. There was a pause, then a soft laugh. We'll see how long you can keep playing. The line went dead. A week later, the FBI raided multiple Blake properties. News footage showed agents carrying out boxes of files, computer towers, and art pieces worth more than most people's homes. Evelyn and two of her brothers were taken in for questioning. It wasn't the final blow, Alicia knew that, but it was the first crack in their armor. The day after the raids, Alicia, Marcus, and Lucas met at a small cafe. The snow had melted, the city buzzing with early spring energy. Marcus still carried the weight of what he'd confessed, but he seemed lighter somehow, as if facing the truth had freed him. "I don't know if they'll ever really be gone," he said, stirring his coffee. "People like that. They always find a way back." "Maybe," Alicia said, looking out the window at the busy street. "But now people are watching. Now they know what to look for." Lucas leaned back in his chair. "You didn't just cancel a deal, Alicia. You changed the rules of the game." She smiled faintly. "I didn't do it alone." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the clatter of dishes and low hum of conversation around them. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, casting warm light on the wet pavement. Later that night, as Alicia walked home, she passed a newsstand. The headline caught her eye. "Billionaire empire crumbles under scandal. Insider speaks out." She thought about all the people who had been trampled by deals like the one she'd stopped, all the voices that had gone unheard. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from the same unknown number. This time there was no threat, just 4 words. "The board is yours." She stared at it for a long moment, unsure if it was a warning, a concession, or something else entirely. Then she put the phone in her pocket and kept walking. For the first time in months, the air felt lighter. She didn't know what the next move would be, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't afraid to play.